Hello, class, and today we are going to finish up our speciation notes, our macroevolution notes. This is part 3 of our lecture. Now, we're going to pick off where we left off. We finished part 2 by talking about pre-zygotic barriers. Once again, those were barriers that prevented a zygote from forming. And just to recap those, we had geographic isolation, also known as allopatric speciation. We had ecological isolation, also known as habitat isolation. We had temporal isolation, behavior isolation, mechanical isolation, and gametic isolation. Once again, all those were pre-zygotic barriers. Once again, they prevented a zygote from forming. Now we're going to look at post-reproduction barriers, post-zygotic barriers. So the zygote forms, but then after that, things go wrong. Either maybe it doesn't completely develop into the offspring are weak, maybe they're sterile, or they break down after one generation. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at these post-zygotic barriers that prevent hybrid offspring from developing into a viable fertile adult. And guys, there's 3 types of post-zygotic barriers. We have reduced hybrid viability, reduced hybrid fertility, and hybrid breakdown. And here we actually have 2 pictures of animals that suffer from reduced hybrid fertility, where once again, they're going to have, these offspring are sterile. They're not going to have babies of their own. For example, a zebroid, which comes about from a horse and a zebra that are hybridized with each other. You get a zebroid, it ends up being sterile, so it doesn't become its own species. And here we have a mule that comes from a donkey and a horse being mated. A mule ends up being sterile as well. So let's look at these. Let's look at the first one, reduced hybrid viability. So when it comes to reduced hybrid viability, guys, the egg gets fertilized, the zygote forms, but then, what happens, it just goes wrong from there. Either the zygote doesn't completely develop into the offspring, it ends up being, doesn't completely develop, or the offspring is born, but it's not really viable. It's not healthy. There's maybe genetic disorders, or maybe there's no adaptations that really help it survive in the wild. So it's pretty much a dead end, and it doesn't become their own species. For example, this salamander here is a cross between 2 close related species, but these hybrids don't completely develop. And those that do are really frail, they're really weak, and they don't survive really well in the wild. So this is reduced hybrid viability. Zygote forms, but then after that, either it doesn't complete development, or those that are born are weak and frail and do not survive. So reduced hybrid viability. Next, we have reduced hybrid fertility. So this is where you have these closely related species, they mate and they produce a hybrid, and they're vigorous, they're healthy, they could do work, but they're sterile. So that's what reduced hybrid fertility is. And usually they're sterile because the chromosomes of the parents kind of differ in the number and structure. So what happens in meiosis, when they forming those sex cells, they kind of fail to produce those normal gametes. For example, when you make a horse and a donkey, you get a mule. Mule are vigorous, they could do work, but they're sterile. The horse has 64 chromosomes, 32 pairs. Donkeys have 62 chromosomes, 31 pairs. That ends up giving the mule 63 chromosomes, an odd number. So it ends up making sex cells that, once again, are not going to be normal. They're going to have a mutation, and they're going to end up being sterile, and they can't have any offspring of their own. So they are not a species on themselves. So that's reduced hybrid fertility. And then our last one, our last post-zygotic barrier is hybrid breakdown. And this is where you have close related species, you're able to cross them, and the first generation's all good. They're fertile, they're viable, but then after that, it comes crashing down. The second, third generation are either feeble, they're weak, they don't survive well, or they end up being sterile. Usually, we don't really see this in animals. We tend to see it with closely related species of plants. For example, these strains of cultivated rice, 2 different strains of rice are crossed with each other, and the first generation's all good, really good rice, good output. But then the next 2 generations, everything comes crashing down. They end up being really small. They end up being sterile. So definitely an example of a hybrid breakdown. So once again, these are post-zygotic barriers. We have hybrid breakdown, reduced hybrid viability, and reduced hybrid fertility. So now we have all these barriers, once again, that we mentioned that maybe caused these speciations, but are now preventing these closely related species from becoming a single species again. Now, the last thing we have to discuss, okay, we have the speciation. We know that speciation can come about by the splitting of a population, and then they evolve independently of each other. Is, well, how fast does this happen? And right now there's a current debate about the rate of speciation, and there's pretty much two camps, two kind of theories. We have what we call gradualism, which is kind of this slow wheel, just, a slow, over millions of years, you have these populations diverge and change slowly over time. This was proposed by Charles Darwin, Charles Lyell. Then we have punctured equilibrium, where what happens is you get a lot of change really quickly. And by quickly, we're still talking about like 10,000, 50,000 years. But then you have these periods of equilibrium where nothing happens. And this is kind of championed by two evolutionary biologists, Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Aldrich. And here we have Niles Aldrich. So let's look at these ideas. So once again, gradualism is this idea of just, once again, a population splits, for example, here, and then slowly over millions of years, they start to accumulate small little adaptations that they become so different that they become different species. And once again, we're talking millions of years, once again, very gradually becoming different species. Now, notice how it's different from punctured equilibrium, where the rate of speciation here isn't constant. What happens is you have these rapid bursts of change. Usually they think it happens right after a great event, sort of some sort of catastrophe, maybe, a drought or something that wipes out a lot of the life, maybe a meteor hitting a planet. And those organisms that survive end up changing really quickly within like 10, 50,000 years. They speciate into a lot of different species. And then you have these periods of just equilibrium where they don't have a lot of change. So this is punctured equilibrium. Now, which one is it? Is it gradualism? Is it punctured equilibrium? We actually have evidence for both. The fossil record shows that some life has gone through gradualism, other life has gone through punctured equilibrium. So both of these have actual evidence for them. Here we actually have a picture of Stephen Jay Gould, who actually passed away. He was a very well-known Harvard paleontologist and evolutionary biologist. And guys, you've made it big in your field when you come out in The Simpsons. He actually came out in The Simpsons in 3 episodes. So you knew he was on top of his game, really well-known. He wrote several books. These are just some of them. If you ever take an evolutionary biology class at the university level, you'll probably have to read one of his books. For example, I've read Dinosaur in a Haystack, really good to read. The Panda's Thumb is also one part that I read for one of my classes that I took at the university level. Now, the last thing I want to mention, guys, evolution is not I don't want to make sure that you don't get some misconceptions about evolution. And one of them is that evolution is not goal-oriented. And what I mean by that, it's not like, it's not like the surviving species alive right now are some sort of peak of perfection. There's no go at the end of evolution. Remember, it's all about compromise. It's all about the environment, kind of selecting what ends up being an adaptation at a particular time. And the environment, remember, is always changing. So there's always compromise and there's random chance, just a mutation that pops up that gives you a variation. So it's, once again, it's not like, we're going towards some sort of perfect organism or perfect living organism is what evolution is trying to go to. No, it's not. It's, once again, the environment that selects what's going to end up being an adaptation. So, and that goes for humans as well. Once again, we're not some sort of peak of perfection. So that pretty much finishes our first set of notes over speciation. Once again, guys, make sure you fill out all your notes. Make sure you're working on the speciation problem set, which are 2 problem sets. The other one has a little bit of origin of life, which I'll start discussing really soon. I'll start dropping that lecture on Thursday. But guys, now we know, once again, we know what a species is. We know how speciation occurs. Once again, something has to happen to a population that splits it. They become isolated, reproductively isolated. And then we talked about all the different types. There's pre-zygotic barriers, post-zygotic barriers that might have split that population and now preventing them from becoming a single species again. Guys, make sure you're reading chapter 24. Guys, remember the quiz for this unit, our Moto quiz over speciation and origin of life, guys, will not be till Monday after Easter. It's not going to be till Monday, so make sure you put that on your agenda. So guys, this finishes our notes. But what I want to do is kind of have a little fun. I want to give you my kind of fun video of the day. It's something I saw a while back, and I think it's kind of hilarious. I want to share that with you right now. And it's a video of, I'm sure we've gotten those Amber Alerts on our phone. We all get them. They have that high pitching sound. And usually most of us just look at our phone and it's like, oh, okay, interesting. And we never focus on it. I think this video is something we should do. This is how kind of they expect us to react when we get that Amber Alert. Guys, check it out. I think it's hilarious. So let's take a look at this. So once again, check this out. I think this is hilarious.
Yeah, over to the right. To the right. Oh, hey, hold on. Black on the civic. Y'all get black on the civic. Where's the black on the civic? Man, we gotta save the baby. Come on. We got there it is. Come on. Oh. You got the notification. There it is right there. Go. 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 I got the baby! I got the baby!
So once again, just hilarious. I think that's what we should all do when we get those Amber Alerts. Well, guys, once again, make sure that you check your Edmodo and your Instagram course page daily for the latest news and updates when it comes to the course. Guys, make sure you keep focused. Make sure you're working through your notes, your problem sets. Don't forget about the Khan Academy lessons as well. Guys, I'll be starting to drop the Origin of Life lecture notes starting tomorrow. Guys, don't forget the quiz for this unit for this week will be on Monday after Easter. Guys, make sure you reach out to me. You have questions, you have concerns, reach out to me through Edmodo, through email. Guys, you could once again set up those tutoring times if you wish through Zoom as well. Well, guys, that's all for today. Guys, go out there and have an awesome day.